So let's unpack this. We just saw BioMarin Pharmaceutical make a huge move.
A really significant one.
They're paying $4.8 billion to scoop up Amicus Therapeutics. And, for a deal this big announced near the end of the year, it just screams high-stakes strategy.
It does. It suggests a major recalculation of risk in the biotech sector.
Exactly. So our mission in this deep dive is to figure out why these specific rare disease assets command such astronomical valuations.
Right.
And then we'll zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the whole antitrust context that dictates how these pharmaceutical companies are even allowed to grow.
Well, this is a landmark moment for BioMarin, no question. That $4.8 billion price tag, that works out to $14.50 a share for Amicus.
Which makes it the largest acquisition in their entire history.
In their entire corporate history. They are essentially buying their way into immediate revenue streams and a much clearer path to market stability, which is, highly sought after right now.
So what exactly did they get for that $4.8 billion? What is the core portfolio Amicus is bringing to the table?
It's a highly focused portfolio centered on specialized lysosomal storage disorders.
Okay, so diseases where the body can't break down certain waste products.
Precisely. And BioMarin is instantly gaining 2 established treatments. First, there's Galafold, which is for Fabry disease.
Right.
And then you have the combination treatment, Pombiliti plus Opfolda, which addresses Pompe disease.
And these aren't just, pipeline hopes. These are drugs generating revenue right now.
Exactly. That's the key. Those 2 marketed treatments have pulled in nearly $600 million in combined revenue over just the last 4 quarters.
Wow.
This is precisely why that valuation is so high. But crucially, BioMarin also picks up a 3rd drug.
Okay, what's that?
It's currently in late-stage phase 3 testing for something called focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, or FSGS.
A rare, severe kidney disease.
A very severe one. So they're buying today's revenue and tomorrow's potential.
That near $600 million in annualized sales is the fuel they need. I mean, we know BioMarin has this huge corporate goal of hitting $4 billion in annual sales by 2027.
And this deal absolutely fast-tracks that ambition.
It effectively buys them a multi-year head start.
It really does. And you have to view this merger in the context of what's been happening inside BioMarin recently. This push follows a major restructuring drive they did earlier in 2024.
I remember that shift. It included some staff reductions and, I think more importantly, a necessary scaling back of the rollout for their hemophilia, a gene therapy, Roctavian.
Yeah, that was a big one.
That drug just proved so costly and, frankly, disappointing in its initial market phase.
It did. It led BioMarin to limit its focus to just 3 key international markets. So they're pivoting. They're moving away from that highly expensive, high-risk frontier gene therapy space.
Where the returns were slow and success was, let's say, uncertain.
Exactly. And they're doubling down on established rare disease drugs with proven revenue and critically predictable margins. It's a classic move. Acquire stability to offset your own internal volatility.
And it's significant that this is the second major acquisition since they hired former Roche dealmaker James Sabry.
It shows they're executing a new M&A-heavy strategy. For sure.
That pivot is so telling. But to really get the value here, we have to look at the underlying math. Why is this rare disease portfolio, this orphan drug space, so incredibly attractive that it justifies a $4.8 billion price tag?
Well, what's fascinating is how the orphan drug designation just fundamentally alters the risk-reward calculation for investors.
How so?
It creates this tremendous economic engine that dramatically favors this specific segment of the industry.
How dramatic are we talking financially? Give us the numbers that justify a deal like this.
The data is, well, it's stark. For an investor who holds an equity stake in a company from phase 1 all the way through to FDA approval,
Okay.
if that product has the coveted orphan designation, they can expect to increase their initial capital by a factor of 7.2 times.
7.2 times. That's an absolutely tectonic difference.
It is.
That kind of return doesn't just happen by accident. What levers is the Orphan Drug Act pulling to guarantee that? Is it purely the FDA guaranteeing exclusivity, or is the success rate for these drugs just fundamentally better?
It's a combination, but the real financial driver is the market exclusivity and the premium pricing that the designation allows. That 7.2x multiplier, it translates to an annual return of 46%.
Wow.
And critically, that 46% is calculated after adjusting for all the inevitable drug failures that happen.
A 46% annual return, risk-adjusted. I mean, that figure alone explains why BioMarin could see Amicus as a bargain, even at $4.8 billion.
It really does.
So if we contrast that with the conventional market, the non-orphan drugs, what do those investments look like?
The contrast couldn't be sharper. A similar investment in a non-orphan product increases initial capital by only 2.1 times.
Okay, so what does that translate to?
It generates a relatively modest 12% annual return. So when BioMarin does this, they're explicitly chasing that 46% orphan drug multiplier.
And the revenue stability that comes with it.
Exactly.
But, that helps explain the appeal. But it doesn't just erase the inherent risks of R&D. The drug development pipeline is a brutal gauntlet. What's the actual reality of succeeding, even with that advantage?
Even with those economics, the risk of failure is still substantial, and speed is not guaranteed. I mean, for products that reach phase 2, the likelihood of them moving on to phase 3 is about 55.6%.
And that takes how long?
Typically about 2.5 years. Then, if a drug makes it to phase 3, the success rate improves to 67.7% for getting final FDA approval.
But that takes another 2.5 years.
Right. So even when you're halfway through, you still face a nearly 1 in 3 chance of failure in 5 more years of investment.
And those success rates, they only tell part of the story, right? Because even within that pipeline, not all diseases are created equal in the eyes of the market.
Oh, that's profoundly true. Market perception and investor appetite, they dictate valuation long before a drug ever gets approved.
So what's the difference?
Well, for example, companies developing oncology drugs were valued significantly higher during phase 2 development, around $1,068 million on average.
Okay.
Companies working in other more general therapeutic areas were valued lower, maybe $607 million.
But the real outlier in that comparison seems to be central nervous system, or CNS drugs. Treatments for neurological disorders.
Precisely. Companies with CNS-led drugs were valued significantly lower in phase 2, coming in at just $314 million. It suggests investors perceive the risks there to be exponentially higher.
And here's where it gets really interesting. When you run simulated returns for investments in CNS drugs, that final phase, the phase 3 to approve stage, actually showed a projected negative return.
A negative return of 11%.
In the last stage of development, that is a massive red flag.
It signals that investors are pricing in huge risk and uncertainty, mostly due to the difficulty of clinical execution.
What makes those trials so risky?
Well, defining endpoints for neurological and psychiatric disorders is just notoriously challenging. The trials often require years of really costly patient monitoring. So that negative projected return suggests the market doesn't believe the final price or volume will be enough to compensate for the development risk in that specific field.
So BioMarin's massive move into these proven high-margin rare disease drugs, it's like a definitive flight to safety.
It really is.
They're escaping the extreme volatility and low valuation multiples you see in high-risk areas like CNS, and they're just trading that frontier research for predictable performance.
It's all about leveraging that orphan drug premium to secure growth and, offset the R&D risk they took elsewhere, like with the Roctavian failure.
That leads us perfectly into the next critical hurdle, because once you navigate the R&D gauntlet, get FDA approval, and establish a high-margin drug, the next challenge isn't scientific.
No, it's legal and regulatory.
The name of the game becomes defending your market exclusivity against generic competition. It's why the FTC is so heavily involved in this space. The moment a drug is approved, the CEO needs to swap their lab coat for a suit of armor and a team of FTC defense lawyers.
That's a really apt analogy. The Federal Trade Commission's focus is on any anti-competitive agreements that are designed solely to maintain the brand company's monopoly beyond its intended patent life.
They're looking for tactics that restrain trade. And the most famous one, of course, is pay for delay.
Formerly known as reverse payment settlements. This is when a brand manufacturer literally pays a generic company to delay its market entry.
Right.
A good example is the Impax and Endo Pharmaceuticals case with the painkiller Opana ER. Impax agreed to stay off the market for 2.5 years in exchange for payment, which included a commitment from Endo not to launch its own authorized generic.
And that no authorized generic commitment or no AG commitment, that's where the FTC's focus has really intensified, right? Moving beyond just cash.
That's right, because it serves as non-cash compensation, and the value is immense. A no AG commitment means the brand company agrees not to launch its own cheaper generic version, while the first filer has exclusivity.
Why is that so valuable?
because the brand's own generic is often the most formidable competitor. So by agreeing to sit out, the brand guarantees the generic challenger a period of unchallenged market share. The FTC sees that as a form of reverse payment, even if zero cash changes hands.
So they are trading money for time, essentially, letting the generic firm enjoy a little monopoly of its own.
Which is just as damaging to consumers as a direct cash payment. We've seen settlements specifically prohibiting these deals, like those involving Endo, Teva, and Allergan.
Then there's another aggressive tactic the FTC pursues, product hopping.
Right. This is a scheme designed to thwart generic competition by intentionally shifting patients to a new patent-protected version of the drug right before the original loses exclusivity.
And the classic example here is Reckitt Benckiser and Indivior with their opioid addiction treatment, Suboxone.
Correct. They allegedly switched prescriptions from the tablet form to a new film version.
And they claim the film was safer.
They did. They claimed children were less likely to be accidentally exposed to the film versus the tablet, but the FTC charged it as an antitrust violation because the real aim was to shift patients away from the tablet market, where generic competition was about to hit, to the new patent-protected film.
So a scheme to evade market loss, not a genuine safety upgrade.
Exactly. And finally, you just see flagrant abuses of the regulatory process itself, using administrative rules to create artificial delays.
Like using the FDA's own rules against them.
Absolutely. Brand companies sometimes misuse FDA regulations as to run out the clock. The FTC challenged Shire Pharma for waging a campaign of serial, repetitive, and unsupported filings with the FDA about vancomycin capsules. All of those filings were aimed at obstructing and delaying generic approval.
And even improper patent listings can be used as a weapon. This brings up the notorious Orange Book listings.
It does. So for any listener who doesn't live and breathe pharma law, the Orange Book is basically the FDA's official catalog of approved drugs and their patents.
It's what the generic companies use to see what patents they have to challenge.
Right. And an improper listing, a patent that shouldn't even be in there, can trigger an automatic 30-month stay on generic approval.
30 months. That's 2.5 years of pure monopoly protection.
Just through an administrative delay. It's immense power. And we just saw the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit affirm an order against Teva, requiring them to delist asthma inhaler patents from the Orange Book precisely because they were improperly listed.
So the FTC is getting much more aggressive there.
They are. It just shows that maintaining that exclusivity is becoming an increasingly expensive and complex legal battle.
So bringing these two themes together, what does this all mean for you, the learner, trying to understand pharmaceutical market strategy?
I think we've synthesized two major forces driving growth right now. The BioMarin acquisition of Amicus, it's a textbook example of leveraging these high-growth, high-margin rare disease assets.
Seeking that 46% risk-adjusted annual return.
Right, and that strategy is made necessary partly by the huge cost and risk of R&D and the high volatility in areas like CNS, but also because maintaining market exclusivity requires this extremely fierce and increasingly scrutinized legal defense against the FTC.
Yeah, my key takeaway really connects that market strategy to the regulatory pressure. The increasing intensity of FTC enforcement, challenging non-cash payments like no AG commitments, aggressively correcting improper Orange Book listings. It suggests the industry's traditional playbook for maintaining monopolies is under serious pressure.
The walls are closing in a bit.
They are. That regulatory backstop is forcing pharma giants to find growth through strategic M&A, like the Amicus deal, instead of just relying on indefinite exclusivity for their blockbusters.
It really means that winning the regulatory battle is now almost as expensive and complex as winning the scientific one.
Okay. Here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on, built on the data we just examined.
Right.
Despite the high success rate of drugs once they reach phase 3, it's a nearly 68% chance of approval. The investment returns simulated for that final stage, phase 3 to approved, were generally projected to be negative. So think about that. Why? It suggests that the market applies the true valuation premium of a company much earlier in the cycle. It captures the majority of the upside before the drug reaches that very last, most time-consuming stage. The risk is priced in early, and the reward is captured early.
The big money is made before the final stretch.
Exactly. Now for our segment. This is not financial advice, based purely on the data points we just discussed in this deep dive. Here is an outrageous but plausible trade idea capturing that tension between low-risk niche markets and high-risk human pipelines.
Let's hear it.
The idea is to initiate a rare disease protection hedge.
Okay.
Step 1. Go long and a small-cap biotech company with a newly acquired, highly concentrated animal health product portfolio.
Animal health.
Because the FTC record shows these niche, defensible markets, think canine parvovirus vaccines or cattle parasiticides, see such high levels of market control post-M&A, often 50% to 100%. This is pure, low volatility, defensive value, protected from the kind of scrutiny we see in human pharma.
I see. So you're hedging against the regulatory risk.
Precisely. Now, step 2. Simultaneously go short in a mid-stage development company whose lead therapeutic is focused solely in the central nervous system, or CNS, space.
Leveraging the data we just talked about.
Exactly. We're using 2 key data points here. The significantly lower valuations for CNS drugs in Phase 2, priced at only $314 million, and the fact that simulated returns for CNS investment in that high-risk Phase 3 to approval window are projected to be a negative 11%.
So you're betting on the defensible, concentrated market and betting against the high-risk, low-return profile.
This trade captures the high-value defensiveness of niche animal health markets while betting against the demonstrably low-return profile of certain specialized, difficult human drug pipelines. That is our deep dive into the strategic math of the biotech M&A world.
And of course, don't try this at home.
Please don't.
And that's our deep dive for today.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.